Trust is the glue of life. It's the most essential ingredient in effective communication. It's the foundational principle that holds all relationships. That's a quote from Stephen Covey. On today's episode of Synergetic Culture, we're going to talk about the word trust. Now, the first thing that came to my mind when I thought about this word was the old activity from camp, the trust fall. If you've never heard of that or done that, essentially what happens is somebody stands up, usually on a box or a platform, a raised, elevated space, turns their back to a group of people, crosses their arms across their chest, and that group of people stands below them with their arms out. And that person's job, that's standing up on that platform, is to fall backwards, trusting that the team is going to catch them. Now, when I was a much younger dude in my high school years, I was a camp counselor. And the trust fall is something that we would do as a team building initiative with the other camp counselors. And then we also did it with our campers. It's an illustration that shows the value of trust. Now, in a trust fall, I'm not exactly trusting my life. I might be trusting a giant bruise on my backside or the balance of whether or not I'm going to get a giant bruise on my backside with those people. But it's a great illustration that shows the value of trust. It also shows what hangs in the balance when there is no trust. The idea of standing up on a platform and leaning backwards, hoping that people are going to catch you. The thought of somebody not catching you and falling completely onto the ground is a little bit frightening. Now, that's such a great way of painting a picture of why trust is so important. And I think Stephen Covey nailed it with this quote. When he said that trust is the glue of life, it really is. It's foundational to relationships. If you're in a relationship of any kind, whether it be romantic or friendship or professional business, any type of relationship, it requires trust in order to build a stronger, deeper, more honest relationship. Now, I truly believe that that's foundational to building a positive, encouraging, and synergetic culture. One of my favorite public speakers, authors, thought leaders is a guy named Simon Sinek. And he did a study, and he talked about it in a clip that I saw not too long ago. He did a study where he started talking to different high-performing organizations and got their input on what made the best, most efficient, most effective culture, team, and organization. Now, Simon Sinek decided he was going to go to the very best of the best, the Navy SEALs. And when he talked with those Navy SEALs, he asked them, what makes the best teammate? How do you pick the best of the best, the guys that ended up on SEAL Team 6? And they outlined for him two categories. Now, I think these two categories are extremely relevant to teams and organizations and cultures. In one category, he had performance, and that was kind of the vertical line in this graph that he created, or a chart. The horizontal line, going left to right, was trust, performance, and trust. And what the Navy SEALs told him was the ideal candidate, obviously, is somebody that's a high performer and a high level of trust. So not only can they execute their own job, but they're trustworthy when it comes to being able to lean on the people to the left and right of them, or those people being able to lean on them. In the context of the Navy SEALs, you're talking about somebody's actual life in your protection. Trusting that the person to my left is executing their job when it's a life or death situation is crucial to the success of the team. Now, as they started to talk about it more, they said that one of the things they noticed is that if they had a high performer, but somebody that had low trust, they found that person to be more dangerous to the team than if they had, let's say, a medium grade performer, but someone of high trust. They even went so far as to say a lower performer, but with high trust, was a better teammate to go into battle with than a high performer with low trust. This stuck out to me in a big way. When I saw this clip, I thought, wow, that is absolutely the foundation for building a strong culture. Trust is so, so important. So I want to tackle it from a different perspective. This is the example Simon Sinek gave is coming from it from the perspective of a life or death special operations unit. But when I think about the best teams that I've been on, I was led by a leader who I could trust. When that leader said, this is what we're going to do and this is why, I was able to believe them because I trusted them. And any time that they said something and then they were able to follow through with what they said, whether it be an expectation or something that they committed to do for the team or the group, or just being somebody that was true to their word, honest, carried themselves with integrity. Those are the people that I had the most trust with. Those are the leaders that for me were the easiest to follow. Now, when I find myself in a position of leadership, in fact, I was even asked today as I'm recording this episode, Adam, what is something that you look for in a direct report? What as a manager, what type of person do you want on your team? And the first word that came to mind today when that question was asked of me was, I want somebody that's trustworthy. Somebody that when I articulate an expectation or express a system and process that we're going to implement and put in place, that when my team says, we got you, 10-4, solid copy, roger that, understood, that I can trust that they're going to follow through and execute exactly what it is that we just talked about. That is one of the most impactful things that anybody can do. And here's a little bit that I don't think is a secret or even hard to figure out. But what makes the most effective and strong personal relationships is also following this exact same principle, trust. I agree completely with Stephen Covey. It's the foundational principle that holds all relationships. So practically speaking, when I first thought about this, I did a bit of a self-evaluation because I find myself in a position in my career currently where I report to leaders and I also have direct reports. And I want my leadership to look at me and say, Adam is somebody that I can trust. When I give a task, when I ask for something to be executed, when I outline a standard or an expectation, that they know they can trust me to follow through. And going a step further, if I commit something to them, they know they can trust that I'm going to follow through. The old phrase goes, mean what you say and say what you mean. It's a huge, huge thing. And then as a leader, I'm looking for people on my team that I can trust. And I want to be a leader that they can trust, somebody they know they can come to, and I'm going to be honest, carry myself with integrity, and be trustworthy. For this type of concept, I don't think it really takes a whole lot to practically apply it to yourself. But as you listen to this, my challenge to you is to think about the areas of your life where you have the opportunity to build this foundational principle into the fabric of your relationships. You may or may not be in a romantic relationship, but I assure you, trust is foundational and pivotal to that romantic relationship growing, strengthening, deepening, being able to withstand the storms of life. Friendships. My best and deepest friendships are built on loyalty and trust. There is something so freeing about having somebody in my life that I know I can call at any time of the day or night, that I can be 100% honest with, and I can trust with the good, the bad, the ugly. I've mentioned this before on this podcast, but if you're listening and you don't have somebody like that in your life, I challenge you. I challenge you to explore ways that you can have that. Maybe find a mentor. Honestly, this week, this Friday, I've got therapy. I trust my therapist completely. There are things that I want to talk to him about this week that I know I can trust him with. But I encourage you to build a relationship, a friendship that's founded on trust, because you're trustworthy and that person trusts you and you can trust them. One of the images that I used to give to a group of young students that I mentored for a period of about 4 years, I got plugged into my local community and my local church, and I led a group of high school students, high school guys from freshman year all the way through senior year. And when I was doing this, one of the concepts we had within our group was that what's said in the small group stays in the small group. I wanted those guys to know that they could come into the group and they could trust me. And the image that I would use for this is a vault. I don't know if you've ever seen a vault in a bank or if you've got a safe, but a vault has one entrance, and that thing is sealed shut. And most of the time, what you put in that vault, you don't take out. And if you take something out of that vault, you better believe that it's the person who put it in there that's taking it out. What does that mean? That means, and it meant for those guys that I mentored, that they could bring something to me and it's going to come to me and stay with me. That I'm not going to go turn around and as soon as I walk out of the room, open that vault and let anybody hear and be a part of the information and the life that was shared with me. That is an image of trust. And we built that over 4 years and built a strong relationship. And some of those guys are now in college and doing other things. And we have a relationship still because of the trust and the foundation that was built. And of course, I've already used professional examples, but in romantic relationships and personal friendships and in professional setting, trust is the foundation that must be woven into the fabric of the team in order for the culture to be healthy. Without trust, there's fear, there's anxiety, there's uncertainty. Any type of fear-based environment is never going to thrive and grow in a healthy way. And that's because there's a lack of trust. That type of environment is toxic. Where there isn't trust, there is not a healthy culture. And I don't know about you, but I want to be a part of a healthy, thriving, synergetic culture founded on trust that is built and strengthened by the loyalty and the strength of the trust within that relationship. I think Simon Sinek was onto something in the way that he talked about this and explored this. I think the Navy SEALs absolutely 100% nailed it and got it right. I think Stephen Covey was spot on with this quote that we opened up with. Trust is one of the foundational principles that a relationship and a culture must be built on. So here's the question for you today. How trustworthy are you? Are you somebody that people look at and go, I can trust them to follow through in the relationship, to follow through in the friendship, to follow through in their role professionally. We're going to start with, I mentioned it the other day, the accountability mirror. That's a David Goggins principle, starting with the person in the mirror. To quote Michael Jackson, I'm starting with the man in the mirror. And if you're not trustworthy, to follow that Michael Jackson line, I'm asking him to change his ways. But that's the first place you look. Because here's the deal. I've said this before. Your position does not determine your potential to impact the culture of your team. So if you start with you and your ability to be trustworthy, that will have a replicating effect on everybody on the team. It might take a while. It might cause you to realize as you look around, you know what? I'm not being led right now by somebody I can trust, but I know that what's within my sphere of influence right now, I'm going to be trustworthy. I'm going to follow through, even if I'm not being led by somebody that I can trust. And maybe that's a moment for you to pause and take a step back and think about the role that you're in. Maybe think about the relationship that you're in. I'm not trying to cause people to break up or quit their jobs right now on this podcast. What I want you to do is start with yourself and then take an inventory of the people around you, the relationships that you have. And if there's a lack of trust, build it. If there's no way for it to be built, get away from it. Because this is how a stronger culture, stronger relationship, and stronger people are going to be built. That's all for today's episode of Synergetic Culture. I appreciate you listening. Come back next week for another episode. We'll talk to you then. Take care, folks.